Welcome to the new Rainmaker podcast, a weekly show for visionary founders and team members alike to come together and share the heartfelt, the cringe, and the radically honest truths about what it's really like to build and work for some of the world's most exposed brands on the biggest internet stages. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, and after working for some of the biggest names in the online space myself, I've learned that it takes both leadership and dream team collaboration to truly scale a company to its greatest potential. You can build a business alone, but you cannot scale it on your own. And my goal on today's episode and every episode is to inspire our dreamers and empower our leaders. Make sure to follow and share my podcast with your friends and colleagues, and feel free to tag me on Instagram at vromney with your insights and ahas. Now let's make it rain on today's episode. Okay, Rainmaker family, I have a really special guest. This is actually a very close personal friend of mine, and she is rare in the sense that she too, like me, is behind some of the biggest names in the industry, pulling the strings, building the golden calf, so to speak, and like making the magic happen for what we see and what you see on social media. And so we're going to have a really frank conversation of what it takes to pull off these epic launches. We're going to have a launch conversation, and I'm bringing my friend Audrey to the podcast. So Audrey, will you do me a favor so everybody knows how brilliant you are? And if you don't name drop, I'll do it for you. So just let's put that out there. Introduce yourself to the good people.
I'm Audrey Saccone. I am the CEO of Audrey Digital. We are a marketing and launch operations creative agency. We serve online course and membership owners. In my past life, I actually come from the nonprofit world. So I, came up in my career being very scrappy, which lends very well to launches and these types of businesses. But once I burned out on that, I moved into the online marketing and education space and found myself working for Marie Forleo and just truly applied for a job and happened to get it, which tends to blow people's minds. But I found myself in this company and in this industry and was like, what is this place? And left briefly to try the startup thing, and then came and worked for Sophia Amoruso to help her launch a business class. And once I did that, I realized I know how to run these businesses and launch these businesses. And after that, started my agency. Well, after that, I started consulting, and then very quickly started my agency after people kept asking to hire me to do stuff for them. And I didn't want to. So I brought on a whole team to help me, because launching is a lot of work, which is, I think, a big part of what we're about to talk about.
Well, I just think it's funny that you said that you got burned out in nonprofit and then you went to launching as a solution. I'm like, what the fuck? 'Cause, like, arguably, launching is one of the more stressful, burnt out city type of scenarios for businesses that do it super frequently, which a lot of the players in the online space, we see them launching on social media almost every month.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think it's funny that you went from you thought you were leaving burnout. And now you're like,
I come from an arts background, and
Mhm.
I almost pursued stage management, but had gone very heavy into theater and opera in college and in high school. And for any of you listening who don't know much about theater, it's actually so similar to a launch. You spend 3 months preparing for, unless you're on Broadway, something that's probably
Mhm.
only going to be mounted for 2 to 3 weeks. And the week
Mhm.
before, is literally called Hell Week in the theater community, which is the week where you're stress testing everything, building everything up. And, it's truly the perfect metaphor for launching, because when I came into this, I was like, oh, I get this. It just build, super ramp up, super energy, and then the crash after, and then you recover for a couple weeks, and you just do it again.
Yeah, so you're you must be an adrenaline junkie.
A little bit.
No, I was thinking about that, and we're actually recording this podcast almost near the completion of the NFL season, so they're in playoffs and we're ramping up to the Super Bowl. But it's almost like every NFL team also prepares for a launch every week, if it's just a launch against a different team. And so it's just these sprints. I mean, that's really what a launch is. It's like a sprint of some kind. Some are extremely long. I've done launches that were the actual launch itself, like open cart, closed cart, and then surprise, another open cart, down sell, close, right, which is it felt like a whole month, and then the 30 days, 60 days leading up to it. So I was shot, I was so tired, I dead, resuscitate me on the floor. But so these are sprints, and it's a very unique arena. we're gladiators in a very intense arena, all eyes on us. And you're the one, you're the puppeteer, you're the one that's making all the magic happen behind the scenes. And it's kind of thrilling and it's super fun. You definitely need to be bossy and tell everybody what to do. But let's do this because I know that I get this a lot in the nature of what I'm doing, right? So I architect teams for online entrepreneurs, and sometimes I don't recommend marketing Rainmakers, which is an in-house full-time marketing leader at the helm of a team. Sometimes I actually 100% recommend launch managers, and you know that because I usually refer them to you anyway. So like, I think it would be really worthwhile for us to have a dialogue of what the differences are, because there's a lot of titles, right? There's marketing assistant, project manager, launch manager, affiliate manager, I mean, like, come on, there's a lot of titles out there. And so sometimes our beautiful CEOs who are just trying to like figure out what's right for them gets really confused on what they actually need. So let's just start with definitions. How would you define and not define a launch manager in your world?
To me, a launch manager is supporting on strategy, project development, and execution. So they are kind of like the producer of a TV show. You know, they're the ones, they know everything that's happening. They oversee everyone who's making sure it's happening the right way. And they're kind of helping to make those final decisions of we do things this way or we do things that way. They have their hands a little bit in every bucket. They're a strong leader and they're probably a bit of a generalist when it comes to all the things that they can do. Like they might have their area of specialty, but they're going to know about marketing, they're going to know about ops, and they know enough to not necessarily be executing on all of that, but to make sure the right people are being brought in and to hold them accountable to have it being done the right way.
Yeah, totally. It's like a producer on a TV show is a really great example. That's a really good one. I would say like a wedding planner is probably another maybe comparison where it's like they're not making the bouquet of flowers, but they're working with the flower vendor to make sure that it's living up to the strategy or the vision of the bride and the family, right?
Yes, and guiding the bride too to say, you
Yes.
know, I know you think you want this. However, this is what it's
Uh-huh.
going to look like on camera. You know, they're going to
Mhm.
wilt really easily or these sorts of things, you know,
Mhm.
because they're the expert. They do this all the time. So they're
All the time.
really, you know, there to help make sure you make the right decisions.
So, and if I say anything that you're like, no, just by all means, I love being disagreed
Yeah.
with. So, like as spicy or feisty as I can be
Mhm.
on the giving, give it back to me. So, a launch manager is somebody who's on the scene for a particular moment, event, initiative, A to Z, and then they kind of come back out. Or is there ever a scenario where there's like an ongoing relationship with a launch manager, or is it mostly like the project, this event is our baby, and once I push it out, my job is done.
I think it can go either way, depending on the
Okay.
business, depending on, you know, who the launch manager is. I was talking to a current client yesterday a little bit more about what we do outside of what they've engaged us for. And I was explaining it kind of in the sense of like special projects, you know,
Yeah.
because a launch, while it may be very core to the success of a business, I wouldn't consider that a regular everyday activity. You know, so you have your core team who's doing your everyday marketing, you know, your everyday ops, your everyday finance, whatever, like the things that keep the business going every single day. And then, you know, your launch team can be there to help support with this extra activity. And I think that's where, and I know you see this too, a lot of these teams experience burnout and stress and frustration. They're trying to maintain these regular activities and do a launch on top of it, which is a whole other. I think to go back to the wedding analogy, it's whenever you see people try to plan their own wedding on top of having their life and their full time job, and they're like, planning my wedding's a full time job on top of it, and a launch is the same thing.
Perfect analogy. Yes, I completely agree, which is why sometimes, okay, so a rainmaker is somebody who's on in-house on the team all the time, Monday through Friday, 365 days of the year, and their job is to lead the marketing team to success on an ongoing basis. So the in-between social media strategy and execution, the in-between content, the in-between of anything, literally the in-between of anything. And sometimes I even see my rainmakers will bring in a launch manager if the launch is so ginormous that they even need like a co-pilot. They need help to manage this event, this project, this initiative on top of the everyday stuff when it's that, especially for big brands, because the
Mhm.
in-between marketing is still keeps everybody plenty busy.
Totally. The whole
Mm-hmm.
team, not just the marketing leader, not just the rainmaker, the copywriter, the designer,
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
tech VA, every single person, they're probably working a lot of hours the rest of the year. And if they're not full time, they probably have other clients. So you having
Mm-hmm.
increased need doesn't mean that they have increased capacity.
Pew, mic drop. Yes, 100%. Okay. That's a really great. Yes. So a launch manager is coming in for a special project, an extra project, something that like you said, living your life as a full-time job and then planning a wedding is also a full-time job. So how does one person or one team do two full-time jobs and then also like not lead to burnout or
Right.
unfortunately team turnover? It's like I can't do this every day, every month feels like Q4. Like what is this, right? Yeah, sometimes when I'm working with my clients, I was just telling you before we turned on record, I was doing a VIP intensive last week. So a VIP intensive is where I spend like a day and a half with a client privately and we like you get all of me for like 8 straight hours and we try to shove as much meat in that sausage casing as we can. So we do all the things, team, product, marketing, offers, whatever, and whatever's most pressing. And this company in particular, this client, they don't launch all the time. They actually just do probably one or two massive launches a year, and that is it. And I was like, see, I don't even know if I would recommend a Rainmaker for you guys if that's the case, because like they have everything else so dialed in with some of the organic content in their podcasts and things like that. But if you're going to do a massive launch, and your team is 2 people, I maybe suggest you actually work with an external launch manager just to hold those 1 to 2 massive launches and execute them way better than your existing baby scrappy team. So that's an example of when I recommend you as well. Okay, so let's talk about the launch manager position because you are so many things. You're part therapist, part strategist, part, keeper of tasks, keeper of deadlines. What are some of the best ways to utilize a launch manager and what are some of the let's never do this again with a launch manager? I really this is now your time to like share the things of like how best to utilize this amazing hammer that you could have in your arsenal and how absolutely not to use this hammer.
I can't speak for anybody else, but when I say myself, at least on the advising side, like you use me for everything. Like I see inside of a lot of businesses at a lot of different levels who are within this industry, so I can help guide you on, hey, this is your best lead generation strategy to probably get you up based on what you see success in and then what we're seeing in the industry. This is maybe how you should reconsider this pricing or repositioning this offer. So when it comes to the strategic side, like ask all the questions, don't be afraid to say, hey, what do you see working both for your clients and just what you observe? Because I don't know about your inbox, Veronica, but I get like at least 100 emails every day from just this industry. They go into a special folder, which is why I know the number. Okay, so going back to the things you should use me and like or potentially my team as well for everything for your launch, creating the strategy, creating the work back, knowing if what your team should be doing versus what you should hire out, whether it's you go full service with us, whether I recommend you do contractors, any of that sort of thing. What of your existing assets, if you have any, seem to be working based on what data we have? What should be refreshed? To what level should you refresh them? I think something I'm talking about with a current client, for example, they're like, what 20 things should we change? I'm like, cool, let's pick 3, and let's do them one at a time so we know which change is working. Like use me to help pace you and be a barometer because I think what I see with so many, visionaries, they have so many great ideas and have so many things they want to pursue. I will be there to say, hey, you know what? Those are really, really wonderful ideas. We can't do all of them. What one is most important? Like, I have no problem being that foil to you and forcing you to actually like think critically about what you want to do. In terms of what not to use me for in a launch manager, we are not your assistant. We are not there to like run your schedule and tell you how to use your time. I will tell you when you need to be doing things and when things are due, but in terms of how you do it, I am not your mother. I'm not your husband. I'm not your assistant. Like, that's you. I think that's like my biggest line I have to draw with people sometimes. But I think outside of that, I don't think there are a ton of lines, because launching is such a full, immersive experience, and it does touch on all areas of the business, even the things that are happening outside of launch season. So don't be afraid to ask your launch manager about that. Maybe don't ask them like the week of the launch. Maybe ask them like a few weeks after or 3 months before, but talk to them and use them for their expertise.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid. And I've talked about this in my newsletter before, where it's like the drive-by idea.
Like, I literally read that in your newsletter 10 minutes before we joined today.
Again, this is the beautiful thing. I shared this kind of analogy in the VIP intensive. I'm not trying to squash a creative visionary. I want Walt Disney to dream of the most beautiful Walt Disney World that he or she can possibly dream of. Like, and again, I'm going to use my language, but like, whether you believe to God or the universe, whatever you prescribe to, I think that we are born with very specific talents and gifts and skills, and like incumbent upon us to magnify them. So like, if you came out of the womb this way, that you are a visionary, that you frolic in a field of ideas, that you get in the shower and ideas rain upon your head from the shower, like, that's you. You're the visionary. I want you to vision and vision cast for your people, your company, for everything. However, when we talk about a work home, there are rooms for it to be messy, and there are rooms in which it should not be messy. Like, my bedroom is my sanctuary. It is not a mess. My children's playroom, let's just not go in there because it's never cleaned up, but that is totally appropriate. Sometimes when my creatives are unrestrained in any way, it's like walking into their work home, and every room of the work home is a complete disaster. Everything is a messy junk drawer, and teams can't operate efficiently that way. So what we try to do is have pockets, spaces, dedicated meeting or rooms or initiatives where that creative can be fully creative and have that art room, so to speak. And then other times we're executing in efficiency, and there's that room. And so trying to just create boundaries within the organization, but that also goes with vendors and relationships. Not every conversation that you have with a client can be ideation time. Like, not every meeting should be cannibalized and brainstorming. At some point, brainstorming has to like be done. And now it's time for pure execution at the highest level, so that there is some ease to a typically very intense situation, right? Like, strategy that is constantly in flux gets real hard because it's at the top and it affects everything at the bottom. So sometimes, unfortunately, I see even my clients, and we've shared mutual clients before, where I was their fractional chief of staff, or I was consulting them in some way, and then we pull you in, or you're already on scene as the launch manager, which is why we love each other so much. But like, I've seen that where the strategy was like signed off, signature, we're all happy, and then what, a week later, a couple days later, or like you said, a week before the launch, or like days before the launch, or in the middle of the launch, we want to like pivot the whole thing. It's like, whoa. So yes, I see my incredible vendors like yourself not be put up for success when there's not some restraint in the strategy and the timing of when to sign off on certain things. I think the other thing that sometimes I see my vendors not get set up for success is like, especially you, because not only are you a launch manager that you can have conversation with and you can like be this, traffic controller, but then you also have the agency side, which is such a gift because you have the writer, the designer, the tech, that, I mean, like, you literally are one-stop shop for anybody that doesn't even have that on their team. But if I'm asking someone else to write emails for me or sells copy for me, and I'm not then providing them a brand voice guideline or something for you to capture my voice when we're already working in a sprint, that can be really hard, I would imagine, from your side as well.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was actually something I was thinking about the other day. There's somebody we just started working with who were helping them get ready for their launch, and it was kind of a last minute pinch hit. We came in and they don't have a brand voice guideline, and they were all set with emails, but we were working on some social content for them and some ad content, and we were having some challenges with getting the right voice fit because, that takes a lot of time to establish with a client. Like, I don't care how good of a copywriter you are. The number of people who this person got my voice right away. I think that's honestly 10% of people. And it's when they find a copywriter whose voice just happens to be the same as theirs. But if you're just, hiring a team and you're being paired with a copywriter, it can take honestly 2 or 3 months, just with onboarding anything, for it to really mesh and gel and be just where you need it to be. So, I think it's having patience and grace on both sides, and not being, if you're the client, not being upset that they're not getting you if you're not really giving them the right direction. And, on our end, we always say thank you so much for the feedback. Do you have any other reference copy we can use? How would you say this differently? Do you want to dictate some things into Voxer or a voice note, and we can use that to extract voice? We'll work with you, but I think to have someone come in and help you get over the finish line and expect anything voice or sometimes even design wise, if you don't have clear guidelines, to be perfect, is unrealistic.
Yeah, no, spot on. 100%. It's hey, can you make me dinner? But I didn't tell you that I hate pepper, and pepper closes up my throat. And most recipes with chicken have salt and pepper, right? I know this seems basic. It's not that you can't, to some degree, relinquish the need to micromanage everything, because you're okay, I'm hiring professionals. They'll spot check me if I'm missing something.
Yeah.
But what we also want to avoid is dumping and running. And so sometimes what I see, what happens to great vendors, the greatest of great vendors like yourself, a writer, a designer, anybody, is I dump and I run, and then I come back around. And when I'm coming back around, I'm coming back usually with criticism and negativity when I didn't actually set you up for success. And it's my investment that I'm shooting myself in the foot for. So it's only really me to blame. I'm paying for this. I should probably see it through and be a steward of this money that I've invested somewhere else. We'll be back with this interview right after the commercial break. Did you know that I have a free Rainmaker hiring kit? Skip the formal recruiting process and learn how to source Rainmaker applicants that are already connected to you. I'll show you how to turn a walking testimonial into a rockstar team member for free. Head to veronicarami.com or click the link in my show notes to get your hands on the free Rainmaker hiring kit. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, so let's talk about launches more, because you've referenced a couple times already in this recording that sometimes you're called in at last minute. I'm I don't want you to tell the world that you're available within 24 hours notice. But ideally, this is something that we train the Rainmakers, right? So we train inside our Rainmaker residency program, this is how, if you're going to hold this launch internally, this is the time frame, this is how you would hold it. This is giving yourself buffer. In for you, and I know you're scrappy as hell and fast because you've been doing it for so long. Ideally, how much runway do you prefer this event when you get the call? I would love to know what your run rate is, so to speak, in getting stuff like this done.
I mean, in the absolute most perfect of perfect worlds, which will never happens, 6 months. That's always the best, because it really is 3 months of active work. But if we can get that time on the front end, we can get so much done ahead of time. We can do so much strategic planning. We can really support in ramp up and lead gen in advance to really make sure we're setting the launch up for success. And that doesn't mean we're actively working with you for 6 months. It could mean I'm consulting with you for 3 months, to make sure what's the launch plan. We're getting the work back set up. What's your team doing? What's my team doing? And then the latter 3 months, we're executing. So that never happens. But, if you're I'm planning a launch in July and I want to hire you, please do call me. I would love to talk to you. I don't actually know when this is going to air, but so on a normal launch though, 3 weeks is ideal, or sorry, 3 weeks, 3 months.
3 months. Yeah. 90 days.
3 months is ideal. And that's really 3 months out from when you go on sale in a perfect world.
Yeah. Open cart.
Yeah. From your open cart. Because the thing that I say to my clients over and over and over again, my team is fast, really fast. And they're really good at what they do. The things that hold our projects up are not my team. They are our clients taking their time reviewing, changing their mind on things. So ultimately we need to give it. And even if you're no, I look at things right away. I hear that all the time. And you know what? Some people do, but that doesn't honestly almost never cuts the timeline down, because just because you review something doesn't mean you're going to like it.
Sure.
the first time. The number of times we hit it out of the park on the first pass, it's like maybe 15% of the time.
Yeah.
And again, that's normal. Like we budget for 3 rounds for that reason, for
Smart.
copy and for design. And, so like we just need that time. And there's so many assets to be created. You have to write, design, and build a sales page, which I don't know the last time any of you looked at a copy doc for a sales page, but they're usually like 10 to 15 pages, if not
Oh
more.
yeah. If not more converted. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have like a library of sales page screenshots that I've taken of other people's sales pages that we use as inspiration. And the Google Chrome like full page screenshot thing that I use almost always has to split into 2 screenshots because the file is too big. Like that is how big these pages are. Like they take, you know, days to write, days to design, and days to build. It takes just as long for like our developers to build one sales page as it does for them to build like a normal, like big air quotes, 5-page website, because it's about the same amount of content. So that's that, plus the 60 pages or so of email copy, the 6+ weeks of social content, 30-40 ad assets. Like there's so much content, not to count the webinar or the challenge or anything else you're doing that has to be written, slides created, text tested, those landing pages. I mean, there's so much, the onboarding. I mean, like I could literally just keep going. It's a lot of assets.
Yeah, I think I counted one launch. There was like 800 plus tasks inside of Asana.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
It's wild.
And that wasn't even like the biggest one I've ever done, but yeah, it was, especially if you are breaking, like if you're really deconstructing it, because you and I both know you'd be like sales page, and that is not a good task. Sales page is like, multiple tasks to complete that big thing, that initiative or whatever. And so yeah, 90-day. It's funny because with a launch, there's so many different stages of a launch. Like I think about even from the strategy standpoint, it's like, okay, like why the hell are we launching? Let's just start with answering that question. Yeah. Like, why are we launching? Well, because we have a new product we want to bring to the marketplace. Fantastic. Or we want to relaunch something, or we want to hit revenue in this particular quarter. And like, so let's just start with the why and then reverse engineer from there. I think that's also another like red flag that I often see is if the why moves post. So like what was the why for a launch to release the book has now changed into like, well, it's actually because I want to do this and I want to do this and I actually want to be. So I think again, starting with even like, why are we taking this on? Why are we doing this? Not just for the benefit of the CEO, but for the benefit of the company and everyone that prospers when the company prospers. And then after you get through the why, it's like, okay, now we have to make the case for it. Like there's a lot of noise in the marketplace. So if we're going to go out to the market, it's like, what's the persuasive argument? What are we slaying? What villain are we conquering for someone? What are we trying to help them get to? What aspirational outcome are we trying to help this person achieve if they were to buy the thing that I'm going to position for them during this revenue generating activity and event, right? Like there's so many, like to your point, there's so much conversation. And the more that conversation can be had, and everyone feels really good about that, then everything starts to, the tasks are easier to deconstruct, the assignments are easier to delegate out. Like there's vision that unifies everybody, not just for the company, but for the initiative as well. Okay, I want to spitball all the ways. I'm trying to think like all the ways in which I would even use a launch manager. So like there's the traditional launch, like we're going to do a webinar, we're going to do a Facebook challenge, or we're going to do a virtual summit. Like, okay, call in the launch manager to help us with this thing. The other things that I've seen you or someone like you come in is like, okay, on the backside of a launch. So even if I ran the launch as a Rainmaker inside the organization, but now let's say I ran this epic webinar, this epic Facebook thing or whatever. And I'm like, it went so flippin' well. We have another event in 2 months. So I got to get my internal team focused on something else. But because this thing went so well, man, I would love it if it was evergreen. Then I could utilize you like, hey, Audrey, come in here. Here's all we got. Here's how we ran it. Can you please convert this? I know you've worked on evergreen functions. So we like convert the live thing into an evergreen format. And I don't have resources to do that, but something that you can help me. Another scenario that I've seen that we've utilized you before, just to give the good people an idea, is when a CEO, so like, and this has happened, I'm not going to name names, but a CEO has joined the Rainmaker residency program and we are actively hiring and recruiting their Rainmaker as we speak. But one of the things that I am very strong opinion on is that we don't like to bring a rainmaker in the middle of the chaotic launch. I don't like hiring marketing personnel in the middle of launches. What a bad introduction. Like, it's too stressful. Like, let's not invite the family over when you're stressed out of your mind, right? So we're actually having you help the CEO with this epic launch while we recruit their rainmaker. So the rainmaker is not coming in week one having to lead a launch, but you're doing it for them and they can actually watch you and be on the backside of it. So like you're almost part of the HR onboarding in some ways.
Yeah.
So like there's so many ways that you can utilize a launch manager, and it doesn't even have to be just for like a webinar launch. I've seen you also launch initiatives like a new podcast, a book, a TV series. If like, like it's, again, it's a revenue generating activity event. It's a show. It's literally a tent. You're coming up and putting on a circus tent for somebody. Fair?
Yes. And I love the team training, scenario as well.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I'm not coming in and training your people per se,
Mm-hmm.
but I think to exactly that person you're speaking about, when I was talking to that CEO, I was like, we are going to set your person up so well for success. We're going to make sure everything's well documented for them. Like we have our whole brief that we put together of like, this is what the event is. This is what it costs. These are all the URLs that we use. These are all the automations. So like they're literally going to have a playbook and all of the tasks that we did. So that when they do this again, like I actually don't think there is any such thing as a rinse and repeat launch, but they have a framework of past success to use so that when they go to do this the next time, they have something. And if they say, hey, you know what, we're a little strapped for resources, like time resources, can your team just come help us do this again? We can come in. It's not going to be the same investment as when, we did the whole thing and we planned the whole thing and we had to like come in and do it. If we're just coming in to be kind of like overflow, oversee, and just like supplement your existing team and help make sure you're successful, like that's such a win-win for both parties.
For sure. It's like the day of wedding planners versus like the year-long wedding planner, right? Sometimes,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so with the remaining time that we have, because I'm going to like pick your brain, I can't help myself. And because you are so in the throes of launches, it is a new year. What are you seeing for the forecast of launches? Like, I'm curious what your opinions are on launch fatigue, launch methodology. I know that we are this impending recession in 2023. So does that also then to change the level of proximity to the seller as the person buying the thing to the person selling the thing? Does the proximity get closer because people need more validation before they go out their credit cards in tighter economies? Like, I'm very curious if you could like have your forecast, if you're going to forecast the weather for us in 2023, what would you say?
This is going to sound like such a cop out. And this is kind of what I said when I came in to talk to your Rainmakers. But I think everyone's business is so different, and what's going to work for one person's business and for maybe the industry at large may or may not work for you. So what I actually think is the biggest trend is knowing your audience and knowing your business and choosing the right marketing strategies for you. I think we see a lot of launch fatigue in terms of seeing launches for those of us who work and market to entrepreneurs, because specifically entrepreneurs in this space, which we all know what an incestuous little circle this is, right? And yes, we are feeling launch fatigue because I opened up my email this morning and I saw no fewer than 3 people starting the runway to their launch today. And I know exactly what they're going to be selling. And I'm so excited to watch, like truly. But let's say, I have a client I just worked with who's a therapist and he works with couples, and his clients are normal people with normal jobs, mostly local. He's actually going to launch locally before he goes digitally. He's going to like kind of stress that's it there first. They probably don't see, the online launch model in their everyday like we do. So for them, they're not fatigued. They're like, oh, this person is really speaking to what I'm struggling with and what I'm feeling, and I feel really connected to this. So I think you have to know your audience and know yourself as well, because the other big thing is every day people are getting so much smarter. There's so much media out there. If you don't do well with live video, please don't do a webinar. If you don't have a lot of stamina, or maybe you have, a chronic illness that you battle, maybe don't do a challenge, because you probably don't have the lifestyle to support that. Like, find the things that work best for your business. And then with that, be realistic about how your results are going to be based on that, and measure it, learn from it, iterate, and do it again. I think don't expect there to be some magic bullet that I think some of us have had in the past few years, which has just been luck and timing, and people just having a lot of excess time and money. In the past couple of years, that's, I think, going away, and people are spending. I think
100%.
Yeah. Like, the issue is not people aren't spending money. Like, that's incorrect. It's that people are being smarter about how they spend their money. So you have to give them a really good reason to buy.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I was just going to say. What I've noticed isn't that discretionary income has dried up.
Mm-hmm.
There's still discretionary income. There's still money that people are choosing to invest in investment-wise.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to be more careful with what things will actually yield a return. It's no different than when you're evaluating real estate investments, versus before. It's like just throw a rock and pick a house and it's probably fine. It's different now. So yes, I totally agree. It's not like money has dried up. I think I would say that the logical buyer has increased more than the emotional buyer, which that is something that I've noticed. I'm getting a lot more logical questions than even emotion-based questions. So emotion-based question is more like, can I really do this? I don't have enough experience. There's a lot of that fear, imposter, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of webinar content or a lot of the launch content would be around like internal gremlins and demons. Now I'm seeing a lot of launch content or bonuses that are like how to pay for this within the first 60 days, how to, like, it's a lot more logic based arguments because of that higher threshold of should I do this or should I not do that? So that I will say, but I'm really glad, the one thing that you said that I'm like really glad that you brought this up is that not every launch methodology is right for everyone. And I think a lot of, especially people who teach people how to launch, there can be a level of disservice when you're like, the webinar's the best. Depends. Or virtual summits is where it's at. It depends, because to your point, lifestyle, mental health, capacity, size of team are all factors that should go into what we should do and how frequently we should do something. And so I think that's like, Audrey, if all you did was like a quiz that's like what launch methodology is right for you, it would probably be like really great. And one of the questions was
I think we wrote one, and it's just we have to put it out there because I haven't built emails because we haven't had capacity, and one day we will. But we have our recipe cards, which I think we're going to put in the show notes for all of you.
Yeah. So that's a thing. Like, there's so many ways to put a tent up. There's so many ways to sell lemonade. You can go door to door. You can do what my son did and put it, a sign on the corner of the street where it's high. I mean, there's so many ways to sell lemonade, and it depends on you. It depends on and I think the more that you honor yourself, your abilities, your gifts, your level of comfortability behind certain things and certain requirements, the more honest you are with yourself, the better results you'll have, because you're being most authentic to you. And those, especially when it's noisy, the more authentic the messenger, the more attraction that you'll have to the message. But let's just start with authenticity first, because we can smell when you're uncomfortable. We can smell it. So if you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable. Yeah. That very like make or break attachment. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thank you for having this dialogue about the launch manager position, because it's like I want to demystify it and I want to also make it more accessible, and like just it's such a resource for really built out marketing teams. It's such a resource for scrappy teams. It's such a, depending on how you want to use it, but hopefully we demonstrated all the creative ways that it is such a no-brainer depending on what you're trying to do. And if you look at your marketing calendar, like you're going to know really quick where you're going to have capacity issues and you don't. And there are resources outside the walls of your company that can help you with excellent leaders like yourself. So yay for us. Why don't you tell the good people where they can like follow you, contact you, inquire about your services more?
We got two arms of the business. So we have Audrey Digital, which is on Instagram at Audrey Digital and at audreydigital.co because somebody else owns audreydigital.com. I owned it like 10 years ago and let it lapse, and what a mistake. But that's where you can go find out about our agency. We talk on Instagram actually a lot about agency life. A lot of our team is sharing insights and what's working in there. And then if you want more DIY type resources, you can head over to Launch BFF on Instagram or launchbff.com. We got that one where we have our template shop as well as a really great blog. It's perfect for people who are new to launching and want to kind of get the lay of the land, where we've got things about who to hire for your launch, what different types of launches are. So you can kind of definitely on the not as deep side. It's not the same sort of thing you're going to get if you get a consult with us, but a really good place to get started.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I still don't know, and you just want to have a dialogue on what I would call like a marketing team outfit, like what outfit is right for you, then by all means DM me as well. And like, I'm very forthright where I'm like, I don't recommend a Rainmaker. I actually recommend a launch manager, or actually I think you should have both. So like, again, if you're stuck on which outfit is right for you and your marketing team or your marketing endeavors this year, that's also like, just let us know and we'll guide you one way or the other. We're going to guide you to the right choice, because to me and Audrey's point, it's not a one size fit all for everyone. So let's not make that mistake. So thank you for coming on today's Rainmaker podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rainmaker podcast. We believe you can't get real results or have real relationships that last without being real first. If you resonated with today's episode, leave us a review so we can keep serving up the truth and tips that help you become the empowered leader that I know that you are. And always head over to veronicarami.com to check out all the free resources I have for you and the show notes from this episode. Until next time, my friends.